Hello there, my name is Martin Henley. This is the Effective Marketing Content Extravaganza. And if you're new here, you won't yet know that I'm on a mission to give you everything you need to be successful in your business. Providing, of course, that is that what you need to be successful in your business is to know more about and be better at effectively implementing marketing and sales in your business, which is, of course, what you need if you're going to be more successful in your business. So I'm here giving you everything I know about sales and marketing. We are bringing you the marketing news. We are reviewing the very best and the very worst of marketing content on the internet. And I'm pulling in anyone I can find with experience that will be useful to you if you are looking to be more successful in your business. You can support us in this initiative simply by watching the video, simply by taking something from the video and implementing it in your business and talking about that success in the comments below. You could also like and share and do all of that good stuff. So today is Talk Marketing, so we have a guest for you. Now, today's guest has a Bachelor of Education and a Bachelor in Business. He graduated way back in 1992. From what I can tell, he has only had 2 jobs since then, and he is still involved with both of those jobs. He has been working for Rosscrae International for 26 years as change manager, strategic planner, sales coach and strategist, management consultant, and CEO advisor, among other roles. He is also the founder of the Models Method, which transforms business sales systems using bespoke visual models. He is the creator of the Genius Model, founder of the Models Method, and the world's #1 authority on visual models that sell. He was introduced to us by Ben Jones. He is the author of How to Take Massive Action, and what you may not know is that he started his working life in electronics. Today's guest is Simon Bowen. Good afternoon, Simon.
How you going? Great to be here.
It's great to have you here. It's really great to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. It's interesting because it's connected that you started work in electronics. How did you go? Well, how did you go from education degree to business degree, the 4 years that are missing on your LinkedIn profile, into only having these 2 jobs for your entire life? I'd had 2 jobs before I was 12.
Well, both of those jobs are companies that I own, and
That makes it easier.
it does make it much, much easier. But when I started my life in electronics, and basically, I have a brain for science. I like science, and I thought I would teach. So after I'd worked in electronics and electrics for a while, I went and did my Bachelor of Education, and they sent me to a school in Western Australia that is designed to test the vocational fortitude to see if you can cut it with teenagers for the next 40 years. And I knew within a matter of months that was just not going to work. So I had to go and do something else,
Okay.
and business and adults made a whole lot more sense. And so, but however, I also recognized that, and a lot of teachers don't see this, teaching is one of the most portable skills around, because if we think about business, but really it's business and life, but let's just stick to business because we're talking about business and marketing and sales. The 2 most important systems in business are the system for thinking and the system for influence. When people think about the systems in business, they'll think about the sales system, the marketing system, the fulfillment system, and so on. But I actually think of the thinking and influence as systems. And so business is only as good as the idea on which it's built and the quality of thinking that's driving it. And then the ability to influence the choices people make. So customers to buy from you, staff to work hard for you, regulators to give you the license to operate, suppliers to serve you, banks to fund you, and so on. And so I went hunting for what is the system for thinking and influence, and it brought me back to this recognition that the teaching skills that I had acquired were a central part of that. So then I started unpacking what that looked like, and I I came to recognize that using visual models, using frameworks to think through and then communicate through were in fact that system for thinking and influence. And so it became the way I facilitated, it became the way I ran my consultancy business. The government would hire me and they'd say, we're going to put 200 people in a room. They're at war with each other over an issue, but they're unified in their hatred for us. And you need to get them to agree. You've got them for 2 hours. And I kind of recognized, and the thing is, I've walked into a room with teenagers trying to teach physics. There's nothing adults can do that can scare me. So give me those people in the room and we'll sort it out. And I just discovered that if you frustrate people for long enough, they actually ultimately want to get to an outcome. The energy builds and they want to get to an outcome. So if I've got them for 2 hours and I just frustrate them for 3/4 of the available time, 90 minutes, and then I just go to the whiteboard and say, hey, listen, I think I can draw this. And I start drawing a model on the whiteboard and facilitate the room and get them to build the model with me. We reach agreement and we do it every time. And I got a reputation for being able to do this highly contentious and complex facilitation work. And, it was really using these frameworks of thinking, these visual models as a system for thinking and influence. And it was also the way that I naturally sold as a consultant. I would grab my pen and draw models for the client and show them, what the outcome could look like. And then people started saying, you should teach this. And it kind of all blew up from there. And people worldwide are using our models to sell now.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's really interesting. The thing is, I think that teaching does give you amazing skills. Like I did some volunteering in schools and it was torture because I'm a bit of a presenter. I like to present. I got much better at presenting when I was doing that because when you've got an audience of 30 people who don't like you and don't care about you and you have to present for 6 hours, you get really good at presenting. Do you know what I mean? I might have done 20 or 30 days in my life. People are doing 20 days a month for their, we know they don't work as much as they should, teachers. They're doing 20 days a month for 9 months a year. That is an amazing skill. So that's where the best presenters are. I really like your idea, thinking and influence. And then you have to influence people to buy from you, people to work from you, people to supply you. Because what I've said forever is that everything in business is effectively sales or marketing. It's effectively a pitch. If you're convincing anyone of anything, but your idea that it's actually influence, I think, is even sharper. I'm feeling like I've met a kindred spirit today already, man.
It's well, there's some shared experiences there. One of the most robust training environments for people in sales would actually be to go and teach a high school class. You want to teach a group of 15-year-olds Ohm's law, that the current flowing in a circuit is directly proportional to the voltage applied and inversely proportional to the resistance in the circuit, and have them understand why that's important. They couldn't care less. They couldn't be less interested. And you need them to commit it to memory so they can pass the exam. How are you going to get that done? And you're measured on how many of them pass the exam. How are you going to get that done? How are you going to influence them to commit it to memory? How are you going to get them to understand it? The quality of the thinking that you put into how you're going to get them to buy into that, and then how you're going to influence both their absorption of the information and the decisions they make to study determine success. And then on top of that, they're picking you apart at a very personal level. Gee, you're a bit thin on top. You don't have much hair. You're kind of old, aren't you? Don't like your beard, or whatever the case might be, because students are brutal, right?
Yes.
And a lot of salespeople talk at me. I mean, we live in the same sort of world in marketing and sales, and there's such a big obsession with imposter syndrome and all of this sort of business. Well, if you want to live in the world of marketing and sales, it is the best school in psychology on the planet, and it is a full contact sport. And so,
Yes.
you need to you need to have a level of resilience about it, and you need to have a level of confidence about it. More importantly, you know, this whole conversation about imposter syndrome and things like that, the deeper you understand the human dynamic, the more powerful you become as a salesperson, as a marketer, and the more confident you become. When you can outthink, outsell, and outserve your marketplace, everything else falls into place for you. And outthinking and outselling the marketplace really comes down to understanding more about the human condition and the human dynamic than everybody else. It's not about knowing more about your product. It's not about knowing, more about how to frame what you do into an ROI argument for the customer, and sales cycles and click funnels and lead magnets and all this sort of stuff. All of that's important. But the people that understand more about the human condition and the human dynamic and two fundamental truths tend to win. And those two fundamental truths are not truths that people really like to admit to that much, right? Or at least one of them isn't. The first truth that people don't really like to admit to that much is that actually everybody wants to win. Everybody wants a better car than the neighbor. Everybody wants a better house than the neighbor. Everybody wants to win. The second truth is everybody's scared. Everybody wants to be made safer. And so if you're in the world of marketing and sales and you can frame your message, you can the way you show up allows your prospect to know that if they go with you, they will win and they will be safe. You're halfway home. It doesn't matter what the product is that you sell. If in the person that they meet and then the solution that you're proposing causes them to go, okay, hey, if I buy this thing, I'm going to be just a bit better than everybody else. I'm going to win, and I feel safe with you. I coined this term buyer safety. One of the key things that everybody should do in any marketing and selling is make sure that every step of your marketing and sales process, the prospect feels safer with you than they would without you. And when the prospect feels safer with you than they would without you, the safest thing for them to do is to buy from you. But so much of our selling is industrial age selling. It's come from the old foot in the door, door-to-door salesperson, high pressure, scarcity, and urgency. And of course, the customer feels less safe with us than they would without us. They feel more under pressure. The customer comes to the buying experience with an underlying suspicion they're going to get ripped off. And so, we've got to overcome that, and we have to overcome that by making them safe and actually making it okay for them to win. So the deeper you understand the human condition and those kind of dynamics, the more confident you can be, about how you market and how you sell, and really the product is irrelevant. I'm just going to mute my microphone while I cough.
Okay.
So I don't want to upset the recording with big coughing noises. So, it's kind of a fascinating world. But and so what sits behind that? Quality of the thinking, the quality of the idea behind the business. That's Michael Gerber, who wrote the E-Myth.
100%. One of my favorite books.
Fabulous, right? But a better book that he wrote is a book called The Most Successful Small Business in the World. And it's the 10 principles of the most successful small businesses in the world. Now, the first principle is that a business should be built to grow 10,000 times its current size. And he's chosen that number deliberately. So if you've got one little retail store, you should be running that retail store as if you were going to grow it to 10,000 stores. And that changes your frame of reference to what you should be doing inside that business. But another one of the principles is, in fact, that a business is only as good as the idea on which it's built. And that's actually true. If your idea is half-baked and like everybody else's, you're commoditized and you're going to struggle. But, a lot of our clients, and we have people in about 25 different countries using our selling system, and a lot of our clients are redefining their market space. I think the more interesting conversation for business these days is not how do we differentiate in our market. The more interesting conversation is how do we completely redefine our market? And that comes down to, how good's the thinking in the business, and then how do you influence people to come with you?
Okay, good. You're going to have to slow down because you've already given me about 10 headlines already with what you're saying. Um,
You're right.
I want to go back a little bit because, like, the thing that you're saying that definitely correlates is like the first thing, like you're saying, how do you get the students motivated to want to learn the stuff, to put in the hours, to be committed, to actually pass the exam? And I think the answer to that is to get them to care. And that translates 100% in a sales relationship. The first thing you have to be able to do is get them to care. Now, I don't think it's 100% necessarily, but it's really useful if then they come to like you. I remember, he must be retired now. I had this little boss once. He was a little guy. His name was Leon. And I've lost count of the amount of times that he said to me, how do you get these clients to like you? And why don't they like me and so much? And what I used to say to him is because I don't give a shit if they like me or not. Do you know what I mean? He's there having to say all the things he thinks he has to say to get them to like him. And I'm just there being kind of reliable and dependable and saying what I mean and doing what I mean. Do you know what I mean? And so that's really interesting. And then the other thing you're talking about is everyone wants to win and everyone's scared. And there's an interesting dynamic in that because everyone wants to win and they're scared at the same time, which very often makes people quite defensive and then quite aggressive. And then they often think that the way they win is by beating you and not necessarily working with you to win a bigger battle. And this is then exacerbated because, salespeople are winners. I don't know, Glengarry, Glen Ross, always be closing, all of this stuff. They don't come on the lot lest they wish to buy, all this stuff. So this is brilliant. This idea of buyer safety, I've never heard before, and I absolutely love it. And then to bring us right up to what you're saying, this thing of redefining markets is interesting. The quality of the idea is interesting because everyone knows that that businesses are built on really good ideas. Like everyone has to have an idea for a business, but very often the idea is really poor. But then everyone's so impressed that you've come up with an idea that everyone kind of tells you it's brilliant. Anyway, I'm going to make a video called why bad small businesses think they're good, or why something like that when they're actually bad, because that goes on. What did I want to say? Let's bring some order to this because it helps us with the editing anyway. There's these 5 questions. So the first question is, how are you qualified to talk to us about using visual models that sell? That's question number 1. Question number 2 then is, who do you work with? How do you add value to their lives? Question number 3 is, how do people get better at using visual models to sell?
Sure.
Question number 4, really easy. What should people read? You've already given us a couple of recommendations. Question number 5, who can you throw under the bus who might endure to have a conversation like this with me? How are you qualified, Simon Bowen, to talk to us about using visual models to sell?
Sure. The only qualification really that matters is time spent in the trenches. And so the world...
Can I just qualify that a little bit?
Yeah.
Because I interviewed somebody and he said that isn't what matters. What matters is the time you've spent in the trenches being successful doing this thing, because there are people who have entire careers in the trenches and never achieve anything. So I'm sure you have been successful. So I'm just going to elevate you if I may.
Yeah. So, and let me add some, I agree with it. I agree with that comment. And let me put some kind of further context or structure to that. The world has taught people to believe that what you need to do is go and get an education and then get a job. So go and study the theory of something and then hopefully go and apply it. Now, I also lectured at university for a period of time. And, good university lecturers absolutely understand that most of what they teach the students at university isn't going to help them in the real world. what you're doing at university is teaching them to be thinkers, basically. So when they get in the real world, hopefully they unpack things and think them through. But the world has kind of created this picture of go and study and learn the theory and then do it. What you'll find the most successful people have done is they've gone and done it and then studied what's happened and fixed things and tweaked things and then done it again and then studied what's happened and fixed things and tweaked things and then done it again and then realized there's a bigger picture and studied that and then applied it. So you seldom see elite athletes at Olympic level, and I've worked with a number of Australian sporting teams and the military and things like that. You seldom see elite athletes who have studied the sport for years and then train and try and go to the Olympics. What you usually see is someone who's trained for years and then studied the detail and the finesse to actually get better at it. And so I've spent the better part of 30 years in sales at all sorts of levels of industry, and at all kind of product and price positioning levels. I've led quite substantial business units inside large Australian companies, and we've had our own management consultancy now for 25 years, where I've been tasked with the job of getting people that are war over an issue to agree to it. The government would hire me and say, we're going to put them all in a room. They hate each other, but they hate us together collectively. They're universally joined in their hatred for us. And you've got to get them to agree. I'm not an engineer, but I keep getting hired by mining companies to sort out their project management divisions. I'm not a pharmacist, but I get hired to facilitate the control of the cost of the most expensive pharmaceuticals into hospitals across Western Australia. I'm not and have never been in the military, but I get hired to work with the military and the Department of Defence and contractors on how we're going to deploy bases, for the Australian military into war zones. I'm not a doctor, but I get hired to facilitate all the clinical networks and clinical pathways for the health system, and workforce planning for a new multi-billion-dollar hospital that's being built. I'm not an architect, but I get hired to facilitate all the stakeholder engagement for a $1.4 billion sports stadium that is 5 kilometres from where I'm sitting right now, that then wins the best stadium in the world last year. So I have none of this expertise, but what I am is a phenomenal facilitator and thinker and influencer. And so I can take any number of people in a room and get them to an outcome. And I do it because I draw visual models. At some point, I know I'm going to get a bit of geometry and draw a model and bring everybody into the model. And if I can draw, I can show you the secret behind it. If it's okay for me to draw something for you right now, and I'll talk through it while I draw it, so that people can picture it if they're just listening to this on the audio, right? But
yes, okay.
When two people are in a discussion about something, you have one person who's pretty happy with their idea. They're the proponent of the idea, and this is their truth. Then you've got the other person who's not sure. And the person with the idea wants to push their idea to the other person. As soon as you exert any kind of force on somebody, whether you push or pull, they will automatically exert the opposite force because people are basically scared. And so their job is to push back. So you've got two people pushing, and so you get this kind of compete and retreat dialogue going on. So you put 200 people in the room that hate each other over an idea. This is all that's happening. You get a whole lot of people from different kind of perspectives talking, and this is what's happening. Now, we know that in conflict, if you really want to resolve conflict, you would put a mediator into the mix, and the mediator completes the coaching triad. And the mediator might go to, now, in every conversation, in every relationship, this is not going to make anybody feel good, unfortunately, but in every relationship, whether it's a marriage or a business relationship or whatever, the person who is least emotionally invested is in control. Can I repeat that? In any relationship, the person that is least emotionally invested is in control. And so if you want to control a communication or a relationship, you need to have the other party more emotionally invested than you. And so in order to deal with that, we use this kind of mentoring or coaching triad where you have a person who is not emotionally invested at all, and that allows them to be in control of the conversation, and they can perhaps help the two people that are in this compete and retreat dynamic. And so the mediator might go to, and there's also often a weaker partner and a stronger partner in the situation. And the weaker partner is usually the person that knows less. And the stronger partner is usually the person with the idea or that knows more. And so the mediator can go to this person, let's call this person the customer, and they can ask them what's going on for them. And just that act of asking starts to build buyer safety. And then this person might share some thoughts with them. Now, this is absent of any kind of sales positioning or posture from the other person. And then the mediator can inform this person, and in marketing terms, we might call that intel. And then this person go, oh, okay, if that's what they're concerned about or what they're thinking about, let me share this insight that might help them. And then the mediator who's skillful can go and share that insight through another question, because behind every question is a statement. And then they share a bit more information, they inform them, they share more insights. And so what we end up with eventually, by elevating the conversation, we elevate value, and what we end up with is this. We gather intel, and we get their truth, and so what we end up with at the top is this shared truth. Now, the problem is you can't take a mediator with you into a conversation, certainly not into a sales conversation. And so I stumbled across, I didn't totally stumble, it was sort of planned. I stumbled across this idea that instead of taking a mediator into sales conversations and marketing conversations with me, what if I made the model the mediator? And instead of me trying to tell them my idea, I'm just sharing a model with them. And now instead of it being me versus you, it's the two of us looking at a model together. Now we're actually side by side talking about this thing in the middle and building it together. And the entire dynamic changes. And once that shift has occurred, we can influence any kind of conversation. And so it exploded as a concept, and I started selling like that. So while everyone else was carrying a lined notepad, I was carrying a sketch pad. And in the large corporate environments, I helped Austal Ships, who are a $51 billion company out of Australia, building 10% of the US Navy fleet. I helped build their global sales process. It takes them about a year to sell a ship that's worth about $150 million. And so, we taught we taught them how to have conversations with clients that let the client feel like they're being facilitated rather than sold to. So one of the superpowers is learn to facilitate rather than sell. And that's a big, which is really what I've just described in that little diagram. And it's how I used to sell. So I'd walk around with a sketch pad with the forward scout that's sent out by the corporation to see who could help them. And I'd sit there and sketch, draw models, and they'd go, oh, that's amazing. That makes sense. Or that would work. I need to tell people back in the office about that. And I'd tear out the page and I'd go, why don't you take that and I'll take a photo? And off they'd go. Now that forward scout has turned into an internal salesperson for me, walking back in with a hand-drawn artifact of our sales conversation, which wasn't contrived because it's not a PowerPoint deck or anything like that. And they're saying, we need to talk to this guy because he's got this really interesting model. I can't explain it properly, but he has agreed to come in and have a meeting and take us through it. Now I'm going to get in front of everybody that's involved in the decision, and I'm going to repeat that conversation. And then the other thing is they will have never seen anyone sell like this before. And the great innovation in business is how you sell. So 100%. There's a lot in this. There's a lot in this. I could go on about it all day, but so okay. What qualifies me? I've been doing it for 30 years and testing and trialing and modifying and studying and learning.
Yes. Okay, good. I've got some things to say. So let's start with that. I think like this distinction that I can't remember the guy's name. But this distinction that the guy said, like there is a difference between having done something for 30 years and then having done it successfully for 30 years. There is a world of difference in those two things. Correct. And I think the difference is having the ability to consciously evolve or even unconsciously evolve, but to evolve. So you can do stuff and do stuff and do stuff. But if you're not looking, especially if in like the sort of work that we do, if you're not looking at how this works for the people that you're presenting it to, like it does feel like you're just hitting them over the head with it. If it feels like that for you and you're doing the hitting, imagining how it feels for them, you know? So that's the one thing I wanted to say. The one thing I really want to say is, given you've spent the last 30 years drawing, I did expect you to be much better at drawing than you seem to be.
That's great. So, you know, one of the things that people say to me, I want to actually backtrack on the first comment you made, but one of the things that people often say to me is, but I can't draw. And I go, can you draw a circle, a triangle, a square, and a line? Because that's all you actually need. Yeah. And it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting, Martin. People don't care how messy you're drawing in. And here's the deeper psychology of this. We live in a digital world, but humans are analog. I want to repeat that. We live in a digital world, but humans are analog. And so the analog TV used to get the snowy picture, flaky picture, and then you find the perfect picture. The digital TV just has picture or blue screen, right? Yes. But humans are not ones and zeros. Humans are analog. And PowerPoint is a digital medium. Click, next thing, click, next thing. And the human brain is trying to, I was still looking at the last thing and the next thing's come up and your mouth is moving. When you draw like I just did, they're seeing it come. The presentation is analog, drawing is analog. And when you draw people in. And it just, and there's some deeply powerful psychology behind this. The first thing a child usually commits to paper is a really bad drawing of mum and dad and the family. And they get loved up like you wouldn't believe as a consequence of that. It often gets framed and put on the fridge or whatever, right? And so there's this deep connection to drawing that we have because it's the first thing we did. Cursive writing and cursive text was not the first thing we did. On paper, often it's the thing we learn to hate because of how it's taught in schools, right? The oldest form of recorded human communication is cave art. Our Aboriginal people, 60,000 years old, right? And it's drawing, quite frankly. When you draw people in. And so I never use PowerPoint if I can avoid it. And in fact, we teach people not to use PowerPoint in the sales process, but actually to draw. And you know what? When you draw badly, what it says to the client is you have all of this in your head. None of this is pre-prepared on a slide. You know your stuff because you've just produced that off a blank sheet of paper or a blank iPad screen. You know what you're doing. I feel safer with you because you know what you're talking about. And if I back it up and then back up, so, people go, oh, but I'm such a bad drawer. I go, it doesn't matter. They don't care. If I present at a conference, I'm walking around the room with my iPad drawing and it's going up on the screen behind me and everybody else uses PowerPoint. And I know I'm going to be the highest rated speaker at that conference because I'm the only one that's actually doing that.
And you're so humble as well, you know?
Yeah, so right. So, people contact me. They go, "We need your slides for the conference." I go, "I don't have slides, but I'll give you the PDF afterwards." But
Yeah.
I'll be producing the the visual stuff as I go. Now, what it also affords me is enormous flexibility. I'm not trapped inside a digital sequence, which is what PowerPoint is. So if the room moves or reacts to something I've drawn, I can instantly go deeper on that. And so it's a real-time testing and measuring. The other side of, you've done it for 30 years. Did you do it, have you done it once over and over again for 30 years, or have you got 30 years of experience? I think the real measure of what did you learn from being in the trenches is being able to teach it to other people and getting them to get the same results. That's the real measure. And we've just taught hundreds and hundreds of companies to do this. And the first time we teach a company a model, they usually make, it's not uncommon for them to make the biggest sale they've ever made. People's confidence levels goes up, but the real measure of what qualifies you to do something is, have you been able to teach other people to do it and get the same results without you there? That's what qualifies somebody. Is this thing repeatable? Can you install it into other people and have them get the result? That's why teaching is such an important and powerful skill set. Interesting.
Really, really interesting. Now, we are definitely peas from a pod. I mean, this is a little bit cringy because it's only me saying this to you. I'm hoping I convey this to you. I'm also, like, when I teach, I draw on the flip chart. But when I used to pitch, when I was an agency and I had to pitch, I had like an A4 pad and it was lined, but I would always turn it horizontal, landscape, and then write and draw across the lines. And then I would take pictures of it and I'd tear the pages out and give them to them. They were completely useless to them. They would have no idea what any of it referred to after I left. And then also I've done talks where somebody has come up afterwards and offered me like actual money for the pages that I'd been drawing on, So this is hugely powerful. So I obviously didn't develop this into a career. I had no idea how important and powerful it was until you've spoken to me now. But what I also did is get to the principle or the conclusion that you've got to, which is, I've got a presentation called The Most Powerful Close in the World. It's about how you close sales, because everyone's terrible at closing. They're not terrible at closing. They're terrible at opening. They've got no interest in what these people want to buy. And then they're really upset when they don't buy it. But part of this is about objections and negotiation. And what I do is I set up like a little tug of war. So somebody has to give me a buying signal. Somebody has to give me an objection, response, objection, response. So I've got 4 or 5 people on each end of this rope. And then we have the tug of war. And it all gets very exciting, and people are old and they've got bad backs and stuff. And it's, it's like that. The point of this is, if they continue to ask questions in exactly the way you're saying, like if someone objects and if it's price, for example, they might say it's too expensive. Well, you ask a room of people, they will come up with 20 different things that somebody might mean when they say it's too expensive. I don't have the authority. I can't present that to my boss. Don't have the budget. It's way more than I expect, etc. There's 20 things. Now, if you just immediately respond with your stock response, you've got a 1 in 20 chance of getting it right, which isn't great odds. If you say, what do you mean by that? Then they'll tell you which of those 20 it is. And you've got, like you say, you've got the intel to say, okay, well, if right now's the issue, what about this? What about this? Why is right now the issue? And they'll say, well, right now is the issue because blah, 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 blah. And then you've got this intel. So in a different way, I've come to the same conclusion, which is they say telling isn't selling. And then they just go out and tell people and hammer people over the head and hoping they'll buy it. Like, just find people with an interest who care already about what it is that you're offering and try and work out with them how they could actually go about implementing this value in their lives and paying you some money. It's the same conclusion.
We may well be peas in a pod. It's, there's a lot of shared thinking there. As soon as someone says it's too expensive, my stock response is compared to what?
Yeah.
Because they've said two,
yes,
TOO, it's comparative, right? And so it's too expensive compared to what? Compared to your budget? compared to your affordability. Because if it's too expensive compared to your affordability, that doesn't make it expensive. That just means you can't afford it.
Yes.
Compared to what? And then let's have a conversation about that. But people are kind of afraid to push back. People are afraid to ask provocative questions. But, if you're in marketing and sales, you must become a master of framing. Context gives everything meaning. And yet context is if we think about a conversation as being three parts, three circles stacked on top of one another: context, concept, and then content. Context is the big why and comparison. And people can only judge value in comparison to something else. Value is only value as a comparative analysis. If there's nothing to compare to, there's no value, right?
Yes.
So whether it's the comparison is what it looks like with it versus without it or whatever. So context gives everything meaning, and then concept is the thing that you're going to do for them, and then the content is how you actually go about doing it. So many people are selling at the content level. Here's how we do it. It's this many days. We provide you with these tools. We deliver it like this. And as soon as you're in that world, you're in the price-based conversation. Concept is about here's how we have redefined this space. But context is why does it matter? And then the fourth thing that really matters is contrast. What is it that we're not? What is it that this is not? And people don't have a complete conversation. So, price is simply the place that people go to when context, contrast, and concept haven't been explained properly.
Yes.
Price is where people go to when you're already at content level and the rest hasn't been uncovered. The other thing...
Sorry, can I just stop you there as well, quickly? Because the other thing about this is it's too expensive. And I only know this because I used to ask rooms always what they mean. Every time I ask a room, someone will say, that's just what I say when I want to get rid of salespeople. Because there is something about price... Well, because every salesperson on the planet doesn't believe there's value in what they're selling. This is the truth.
Correct.
So if you want to get rid of them, you just say that's overpriced or it's too expensive, and they just run away and they go back to their business and they're like, I told you it was too expensive. I told you it's not valuable.
There's actually, and there's an even deeper psychology or human dynamic underneath that too. Everybody in customer mode knows how to ask for a better price. And it's actually the customer's job to get the most that they can for the lowest price.
Yes.
That's the customer's job. It's actually the salesperson's job to defend value. But most people sell based on the way they buy. So they know that they would ask for a better price if they were buying a car. And the customer they're talking to is going, have you got a better price? And their job now is to defend value.
Yes.
And they don't know how to do that. And it's even worse if they don't think that what they're selling really is that special or that valuable. And so a big part of what we're doing when we're teaching people to draw the model is we're actually saying, just sell the model. Let the customer arrive at the decision themselves, right? And it's almost like a takeaway sale. So we do a lot of work with SaaS companies, right? And SaaS companies use the product demonstration as the primary way of selling. Well, that is way into the content. Here are the features of the software. Let me show you how the user experience of the software. Now we're into the content. So how much is that per month for the platform? Right? We're already at that conversation. I teach SaaS companies to, particularly in enterprise selling, when they go, can we see a product demonstration? The customer says, can we see a product demonstration? A SaaS company should say, we're not there yet. Behind every great SaaS platform, you should be able to see a powerful design model. And I'd love you to walk you through ours, and then we'll do the product demo. Would that be okay? In that heartbeat, the customer's just had a paradigm shift. What do you mean there should be a powerful design model? Yeah, for a great software platform, someone should have sat down and put together an actual model of what that platform is going to do and how it's going to work. And they should be able to show it to you without talking about one line of code. And I can walk you through our model, and then the demonstration, the product demo will make a lot more sense. Would it be okay if I walk through the model? Now just sell the model, because deep thinking has gone into that model. Now you're actually selling the depth of your thinking, not the product, because the product is never the product. I'll give you an example. We've got a client that runs motorcycle tours on the Cape York Peninsula in North Queensland. And it's a multiple day motorcycle tour, right? And so they camp out and all that, and you ride right up to the tip of the Cape York Peninsula, the northernmost part of Australia. And you would think it's about motorcycle tourism and motorcycle experiences and tourism. But they had a client, a lady and her children, who wanted to do the tour. And the reason they wanted to do the tour was because her husband and their father had passed away. And they decided that as a family, they would tick off his bucket list. And this motorcycle tour to the top of the Cape York Peninsula was the last thing on his bucket list. And they got to the top of the Cape York Peninsula at the end of the tour, and then they ticked off the box on the bucket list. Now, this woman said, could I write a book about our experiences doing the motorcycle tour? We'll talk about customer testimonials. So she did. And so people go, what's the tour like? And they go, read a book that one of our clients wrote about us, you know. But it's not about the motorcycle tour. So they can sell to tourists, or they can sell to experience seekers, memory makers. We have this idea that we want, I'm going to draw again for you, and,
okay.
And it's going to be a little bit confrontational and provocative. But you know, let me draw that again. I have to say, I don't really agree with Simon Sinek. And saying that in a conference, the room murmurs. It's like heresy. You know, it's like you've just committed one of the greatest kind of, crimes against humankind. But the reason I don't totally agree with Simon Sinek is because Simon says people don't care what you do until they know why you do it. I don't care what a company's charity is when I'm buying their product, right? I don't, and he says, find your why. I think a more accurate statement would be people don't care what you do until they know that they are the reason why you do it. And that little distinction makes all the difference. And so every business's why should be their customers' ultimate success and nothing else. And yet, find your why has led us to, the purpose-driven business. I want to have impact in the world and blah, 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 blah. But your why should be your customer's ultimate success. And so if we look at the world of business, people were taught in the old days of marketing, turn your thing into a product or a system. And you're down here in the red zone where you're basically a vendor of a product or a system. Now, the problem is that customers want to buy products on price. And also, your product is easily compared to everybody else. And so that ran for a while in the history of marketing. And then people went, hang on a minute, it's commoditized. We're selling at a commoditized level. Oh, what we'll do is authority-based marketing. This is where it gets a bit provocative and maybe rocky for people. Authority-based marketing, put a lot of content out there, et cetera, and become a thought leader. Now, the problem is that thought leadership is entirely commoditized in today's world. And we know that because we see people putting a post in LinkedIn that has 2 people view it, calling themselves a thought leader. And if you've ever met someone calling themselves a thought leader and you've thought you are not a thought leader, people could be thinking that about you if you call yourself a thought leader. To be a thought leader, you need 2 things. You need an original thought and you need followers. If you've got an original thought and no followers, you're just a great thinker. And if you've got followers and no original thought, then you're a teacher, right? But people go to the thought leader for information, and usually they want it for free. And so, well, the world went, okay, this authority-based marketing is really challenging. What's the next level? At the next level, you become a hero to your client. And that's actually not a bad place to be, because people go to the hero for strength. And selling strength for your client who's basically who wants to win and is scared in the same moment is a pretty good place to be. But it can create victim customers. And so there's another level above. Every hero has their sage. Luke Skywalker has Obi-Wan Kenobi and then Yoda. And Yoda picks up the lightsaber and says, Luke, attack me. And Luke says, no, master, I'll kill you. And he says, no, come on, attack me. And he just keeps, blocking Luke's attack. And eventually Luke gets angry and closes his eyes, gets angry and goes at him. And Yoda closes his eyes and disarms him in a second. Because the sage has wisdom. And the hero knows the sage has wisdom. The sage has three key qualities. The sage has profound genius around what they do. These two levels of the hero and the thought leader must sell on ego. They must sell on the basis of, I'm the thought leader. I know more about this than anybody else. I'm the hero. I'm going to save you. And the problem is no one wants to buy your ego. Everybody wants to buy their own identity, their own ego. So you must have profound genius. You must move away from selling on ego and sell based on wisdom. The second thing a sage has is this concept of powerful calm. When people kind of come into your orbit, they just feel safer. It's no longer selling from pressure, but rather selling from presence. People just feel like being around you is going to be better for them. And then the last thing is this idea of practical simplicity. You cannot sell a complex problem, so moving from complexity to clarity. You cannot sell solve a complex problem with more complexity. And so it's this idea of profound genius, powerful calm, and practical simplicity. And a funny thing happens. When you become the sage to your clients and you vacate this space, who gets to occupy it? And the answer is the client. And the moment you shift all your marketing messaging and all your sales messaging to away from the concept of an ideal avatar, which quite frankly is something we do so we can search for them on LinkedIn. You move away from the concept of an ideal avatar and you move toward the concept of a hero client. And a hero client has four things. They have character, they have a cause that they're pursuing, they have a commitment to it, and they have a caliber about their ability to actually do something. The moment you make the client the hero, everything about the sales process changes. And yet we're still selling to victims. We're still selling to ideal avatars, and we're still trying to sell from this ego place of thought leader or hero. And, the bit that makes people uncomfortable is when I stand up in front of a room full of people and say, for goodness sake, folks, stop calling yourselves thought leaders. It's just kind of fascinating.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that really is good thinking. I mean, that's amazing good thinking. I mean, I liken myself to Toto. You remember Toto from The Wizard of Oz?
Yeah.
So everyone, they go on this epic journey to get to the Emerald City. They go in, there's fireworks, there's smoke, there's noise, there's colours, there's all this stuff. And Toto's the one that goes and pulls... Yeah?
You're back now, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so Toto is the one that goes and pulls down the curtain, and you can see it's just the old geezer turning the thing. Do you know what I mean? Because...
So Toto...
Right. So Toto is my brand hero because they go on this epic journey to find the Wizard of Oz. They get to the Emerald City. There's fireworks, there's smoke, there's lights, there's colours, there's sound. It's all kicking off. And Toto is the one that goes to the corner and pulls down the curtain, and you see it's just the old geezer like turning the wheel. Do you know what I mean? Making it all happening. Because this, it seems, a little bit like Plato's cave, a little bit like Marx's alienation, a little bit like everything. The absolute opposite is the truth. And this seems to be more the case in sales and marketing than anything else. Everyone
Absolutely.
knows that the only person who knows why they're going to buy something is the prospective customer. The only person who knows
Mhm.
why they buy something is the customer. The only person who knows why they continue to buy something is the ongoing customer. Just go and ask them, why is this valuable? How is this valuable? So
And
when
just get into a real conversation. Toto is actually the most important character in the movie, The Wizard of Oz.
oh yeah, 100%.
The Wizard of Oz is a fascinating piece of work. I mean, if it is true that it's about the gold standard and what was happening in the US economy at the time,
I didn't even know that. I've never heard that.
which is actually, what it's supposedly about. And the Wizard of Oz, follow the yellow brick road, right? The Wizard of Oz is the gold standard, that the bullion is no longer there in Fort Knox. And the characters all have relativity to what was happening economically at the time, and moving away from the silver standard to the gold standard. The Wizard of Oz is an economic story.
Wow.
Study it. Go and have a look. You'll
I
be
will study
fascinated.
it. Okay. I will go and study it because I'm really interested in those kinds of stories. But to come back to what you were saying is that I don't remember quite exactly how you phrased it, but you said you don't know why people don't want to ask questions. Like salespeople don't want to ask questions. Now I know why because I remember why. Because fortunately, I was taught this at the very beginning of my sales career. They taught us to ask questions, and we all resisted. And I remember exactly why. Is because all the time I'm talking, I know what's going on and I'm in control. And as soon as I stop talking, I've got no idea where this conversation is going to go or what question they're going to come up with. So it took me, I think I got there pretty quickly, but it took me some time to realize that actually, if I've got the longer list of questions, I'm always in
Yeah,
control. And I do this when I present. I've got a head full of questions. If I run out of things to say, I start asking the audience, and then the audience get involved, and then I know, all of that stuff. Um, the value is always in the eye of the beholder. To go to your motorcycle story, I would
mm,
never have guessed that they were doing that journey for that reason, looking for that outcome. I could never have guessed. And if I'm not asking them, then I would never have known, or no one would have ever known. And this comes to a bigger idea for me. I had a brilliant conversation a couple of weeks ago with a guy called Mark Carter. I don't know if you've encountered him. He's there
no,
with you. He's written a brilliant book called Add Value, and he's come up with 5 value models. Like typically, whatever value somebody's getting will fall into one or a number of these categories. Because he's been asking sales managers and salespeople for years, what is value, and they don't even know what it is, let alone what the
yeah.
value is that somebody might be taking from it.
Well, value is interesting. I use an iceberg to talk about value,
Okay.
and there's 3 levels of value. Um, the tip of the iceberg, the bit that sits above the waterline, is transactional value, and
Yep.
everybody knows how to ask for that, right?
Yes.
This is the known problem. Everybody knows how to ask for that. I've
Yep.
got a cousin who's a non-surgical dermal therapist, and so someone will go to her and say, "Can you treat my acne?" And she goes, "Of course I can." It's a shallow conversation. It's a shallow request, and it's like the tip of the iceberg. It's $365 a treatment, and you'll need 5 treatments. They say, "Oh, I've seen people online advertising this for $90 a treatment." And she said, "I know that's true, because asking for treatment for your acne is shallow, but we could go deeper. What would you like to do? Stay shallow or go deeper?" And most people won't say, "I'm a pretty superficial human being, so let's stay shallow." So they go, "Oh, well, what do you mean?" Well, below the waterline, the real power of the iceberg is the 600,000 tons of ice at the base, not the 10% that you see above the waterline. And immediately below the waterline, I am one of the best non-surgical dermal therapists in Australia. I've been voted the best non-surgical dermal therapist 10 years in a row by my peers. I have a 100% cleanup rate. This is going to happen fast, and I'm going to give you perfect skin. How's that sound? And they go, "Wow." Because this is the hidden problem. The tip of the iceberg is the known problem. This is the hidden problem. The hidden problem is stuff they're hiding from themselves and stuff they're hiding from you. The stuff they're hiding is, I've tried a lot of stuff, but also I know I'm not eating healthy. I know gut health is impacting my acne. I know that my lifestyle is impacting my acne. I don't really want to change any of that stuff. I still want to eat crap. I don't particularly want to exercise, but can you fix my acne? And the answer is no if we don't address everything, right? So this is the hidden problem. But they go, wow, yeah, perfect skin, fast, 100% clean. Wow, that's amazing. And then she goes, but wow is cosmetic. Wow is a drug. When you give someone a hit, they become addicted and they need a bigger hit. What I want to know is, what would it mean for you if I fixed your acne? And this is at the base of the iceberg. And they usually burst into tears. And they say, I'd go on the trip I've always wanted to go on. I'd meet a partner. I wouldn't wear a hoodie in summer to hide my face. She goes, that's right. I believe a wonderful person like you truly deserves skin you love living in. Isn't that all you really want, is skin you love living in? And they go, oh. Now that sound, oh, is one of two sounds humans can make, and it's universal and it means the same thing in every language. The first sound is, huh, which is the universal sound of I don't get it. And the second, is that sound of deep, profound release. And when that happens, the unknown problem has been addressed. The customer will never think, her customers never think to come to her and say, can you give me skin I'm going to love living in? They don't ask for that. But now that hidden problem, so the top is transactional, the middle is transformational, but the base is timeless value. I want skin that I will love living in for the rest of my life. Can you help me with that? Yes. What's happened with that 3-minute conversation is she's just neutralized everybody else in the market to transactional and shallow. She's taken them through wow, which is sexy, and sexy sells, and she's taken them to profound, which is this timeless change, and profound will outsell sexy every day of the week. It's just that most people never take their value conversation to profound because they don't do the thinking work required to get there. They've read the product brochure, they've got the spec sheet, et cetera, but they haven't. The fundamental question is, what would it mean to you if this happened? Not, how much what would it mean to you? What would change? What would the timeless change be if this happened? What would it mean to you if you had perfect skin and you got it fast? I'd find a partner. And they're talking about timeless things. My life would change. Great, you deserve skin you love living in. Isn't that what you really want? They go, oh yeah. Now sales is comparative, and now they're listening to everybody else through that lens, and no one else is going to be saying it. Now that price point of $365 a treatment just evaporated once we got to the base of the iceberg. It disappears. And they usually pull out the credit card and pay straight away. So, the levels of value is an interesting conversation. Most salespeople that I meet at best have only thought value through to the transformational level, from transactional to transformational. But 100%, I'm going to say 100% of the clients that we work with have not gone to the timeless level. And that's actually what we help them define. They haven't gone to the timeless level where they pin down this powerful skin you love equivalent, and once that cat's out of the bag, the client can't stop thinking about it. People 100%. Are trying to sell to wow. People are trying to sell to wow, and we should be selling to, wow service, wow this, wow that. Wow is a drug. It's cosmetic. It's a narcotic. Sell to this deep, where they just, I'm safer with you, and I know I'm going to win. This space of certainty.
Yes, 100%.
I don't know how we're on that topic, but it's a big topic, value.
It's a big topic. It's definitely a big topic. And I think most salespeople don't even get to the transactional value. No. I think most salespeople just think, thank God somebody bought this thing. And they've never even stopped to think about why have they bought this thing? Like, what is the value that they're going to take about it, away from it? Because there's a weird dichotomy, is it? It's not a dichotomy. It's like an opposition. Like, if you're selling it, you're not the target market. You'll never know what the value is, unless you really take the time to understand from prospects and customers what that
Oh,
value
yeah.
is, and relay that value to other people.
Well, the thing is never usually the thing.
Yes.
The motorcycle tour isn't the motorcycle tour. It's about the memory. I So an interesting thing that people don't really know about is I'm fascinated with patterns, and I'm a pattern watcher. I'm fascinated with patterns, and patterns are not about the components. Patterns are about the connections. The thing that makes something a pattern is the connection between the components, not the components themselves. And so to spot a pattern, you've got to look for connections. Now, if there are components, there will be a pattern. And most people don't find patterns, right? But when you find patterns, you get ahead of the game. And I was a bit obsessed about this, and I thought, what's the most random thing I could think of? I thought, luck. I'll see if luck has patterns. Turns out it does. There's a professor in the UK that published a paper called The Luck Factor, and I started studying luck, and luck is actually predictable and repeatable. And so to prove it, my wife and I and our daughters started entering competitions, sweepstakes in America, competitions in the UK and Australia, win a car, win a trip, and all this sort of stuff. And to date, we've won about $1.5 million worth of prizes. We average about $50,000 a year. It's completely predictable. We've won 2 family trips to Disney World in Florida, 2 family trips to London. We've won a car. We've won everything in our house as a prize, the 2 microwaves in the kitchen and the televisions and stuff. And when our daughters were young, they'd win a push bike, and then they'd say, oh, my bike's too small. We'd say, best win another one. And so they would. And if we teach people what to do, they usually win a trip within about 3 months, because luck is actually more predictable than people think. And I'll just give you one example. People enter a competition that says, hey, in 25 words or less, why do you want a new Hyundai XL? And people will say, oh, because I've got a clapped out old bomb. I'm a poor uni student. I'm a single mum, blah, blah, blah. We found out that this was an early form of crowdsourcing where companies were getting consumers to write taglines. Beans means Heinz was a winning competition entry, right? So we just became masterful at crafting 25-word or less statements that companies could use in advertising, jingles, and marketing. So bumper to bumper, end to end, Hyundai Accent, a girl's best friend, will win you that car. And we tested and measured. So we'd send an entry in. If we didn't win, we'd contact them and say, could we get it back again? And they'd say, well, we'll have to charge you postage. We go, no problem. And they'd say, what's your entry? And because you've got to get it open first. You've got to get it open, and then the entry's got to convince them to give you the prize. And so, first of all, the packaging is noticeable enough to get it open. And they go, well, tell us about your entry. And we tell them, they go, oh, you were so close. It was second. And I go, interesting. What was the winning entry? And they'd tell me. Now, that's the only reason I need to get this entry sent back. At that point, I would have said I would have been happy to say to them, don't worry about sending it back. But, they go, so we'll send it back and we'll charge. I go, no problem. That competition is going to run again next year. And I now know what I need to do to blow it out of the water. And I don't go 1% over. We go 10% over. And we win the car. We've won 5 international trips with the same 25 words or less because we tested and measured. Bumper to bumper, end to end, Hyundai Accent, your best friend, doesn't win. But bumper to bumper, end to end, Hyundai Accent, a girl's best friend, does win. So does bumper to bumper, end to end, Toyota Echo, a girl's best friend. And bumper to bumper, end to end, Ford car, a girl's best friend. It's just marketing. A 25 word or less is a headline without copy. That's all it is. And so luck has patterns, and patterns are formed by the connections. And the moment you become a pattern reader, everything changes. And so, what most people do in selling is they make it up the worst thing that selling was ever told was the gift of the gab. You could just get in front of a client and make it up and expect it to work. All we're doing with models is giving people patterns that we know work, frameworks that you don't have to have any words in at all. And it allows you to freestyle inside of a framework. I've done an exercise where I've stood on stage at a conference, told someone I'm going to sell their product from stage to someone in the audience at twice the price they charge using models, and I don't know anything about their product. And I tell the whole audience this. So everyone knows the rules of the game, but the rule is it's a real sale. So if you're the person still standing at the end and we've agreed the price, you're going to buy that product from that other person, right? And everyone goes, yep, great. And I ask people to call out what they want to sell, and then I pick somebody and I find out their price. My favourite one was a guy that sold training in the hospitality industry, and I said, "What's your price?" He said, $2,500 a day for training. I went, "Great." And I just started, and geometry is really powerful. So I used a model for what the perfect hospitality training would look like, and facilitated the model out of the audience. So I said to the audience, "Hey, folks, I think there's 3 dimensions to this. But I'd be interested in what you think the 3 dimensions are." Now I've guided. This is like, if you want to be in control, the geometry puts you in control. Now I've limited them to 3 dimensions, not 10. What would you think the most important 3 dimensions are? Call it out, run the microphones. They call stuff out and I get 8. And I go, "We need to vote on this because there's only 3." And we get it down to 3, right? Now, inside those 3 dimensions, I think there's probably a couple of 2 to 3 things that are really critical inside those 3 dimensions. What would they be? And they call it out and I put them under my triangle. And you know what's really important about this is what happens when in the intersection between each of the pairs of sides of the triangle. That's where the value is created. If you put this together with that, what happens when that happens in training? And people call it out and I draw it on the model. And so the model was built, and I'm going, who's in hospitality? Stand up if you're in hospitality. Now, the audience was half hospitality because of where the conference was. And I said, "How many people would love this kind of training?" Now, at this point, they've forgotten the whole setup that I gave them at the start, and that this guy said it's $2,500 a day, right? Who'd want this kind of training for your staff? And everyone went, yeah, all the people stand. I said, "I've got to eliminate the cheapskates, sorry." And I drew a bell curve, which is one of the fastest ways of getting rid of lowest price. And I drew the bell curve, which basically, I'll actually, because this could be useful to people, just let me show you on the screen again. Just put my drawing on the screen if you would. So now we've set up the model. I'm going, so listen, if you think about it, there's training in the hospitality industry that's down here in the red zone. And it's, oh my goodness, kind of training, which means it's dreadful. And, people charge a low price for that usually. There's training here in the amber zone of the bell curve. I mean, the key to the bell curve, of course, is there's a lot of average. And so there's training that is okay, and people charge a commoditized price for that. Then there's training up here in the light green zone that is wow. It's going to have a lot of happy sheets from staff, and people charge quite a price for that. Who would want that kind of training? And everybody put their hand up. And I go, okay, but there's another level above wow, isn't there? Everyone's going, yeah, but what is it? It's the level of, like wow is a narcotic, it's a drug. Is this deep embedded change in your people. They come back from the training as different human beings. Notice the change in voice and tonality. This is the level of realization. They don't come back happy, they come back changed. What's that training worth to you? And people are getting out priceless. And that triangle that we've just built, would you agree, is delivering that kind of training? And they all went, yeah. But I can't remember the guy's name, call him Fred. Fred is promising this kind of training not at the price of O, but at the price at the upper end of wow, which is $5,000 a day. Who's up for it? Who wants to buy it? And 3 people put their hand up, and I said, "Remember, folks, the rule was this is a real deal. This is a real sale. So you need to go to Fred now and buy his training at $5,000 a day, right?" And Fred went, but I only charged $2,500 a day. I could have slapped him. We just actually sold 3 people in the room without me knowing anything about what he does. And so in front of the room, I'm saying, "Fred, seriously, mate, does your training deliver what that triangle's promising?" And he said, "Absolutely." I said, "Well, there are 3 people that are going to pay you $5,000 a day for the training with their teams. In the break, you need to go and do that deal." Now, whether he did or not, I don't know, but that's up to Fred's own personal kind of stuff that might be going on. But we we don't need to do all the talking, but we do need frameworks. We do need structure that allows us to freestyle inside of that and do some magic. I mean, it's one of my favorite things to do is just sell other people's stuff from stage because I
Yes.
don't need words. I can get the audience to give me the words. When you shift to facilitation rather than selling, you become the sage and so much changes. As long as you sell, you've got to be the hero. When you shift to facilitation, you become the sage.
100%. And this is, I think, what I've been trying to tell people my whole life. I've not done it
Mm,
as eloquently as you, or with the glorious, art that you have. What's the thing? Yeah, it's genius, man. I love everything that you're doing because it's true. Because it's exactly the opposite of what everyone thinks, which is where the
mm,
truth is. It's like
mm,
if everyone's doing, like, everyone hates sales. Sales is the best job in the world for me. Like, you go out,
mm.
make friends with people, help them. Do you know what I mean? Motivate them to do stuff that they need to do. I think it's a great job. Everyone thinks it's about hammering over people over the head and getting them to buy stuff that they don't really want to buy, which is counterproductive. It actually makes you look bad. I've got some good
Well,
news for you. Do you want some good news?
I will have the good news, but I think there's a really important point that you just made that I think we need to make sure that we keep reinforcing as professionals in the marketing and sales space.
Yes.
Yeah, I think business is the most powerful force for good on the planet if it's in the hands of the right people.
Yes.
It can do things. It can do things that government and charities can't. And if business is the most powerful force for good on the planet, then selling must become the most noble thing that any of us do. And I talk to when I'm talking to health professionals, and doctors hate the idea that they would ever have to sell. It's like it's below us, mate. The sale is the first step in the treatment process. You don't get to treat the patient until you've made the sale. So if you're a neurosurgeon and you need to operate on a tumor, the treatment process only starts once you've made the sale. How dare you consider sales to be below you? You're professionally corrupt if you're not willing to sell that surgery. Because if you're not willing to sell the surgery, you either don't believe the surgery is the best option for them to take, or you don't believe you're the best person to do the surgery, or you're not actually committed to the well-being of the patient.
Yes. C is the crime. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
B and A are probably the reality. Nobody is actually confident. Not so much in the heart surgeons, but in the business world, no
yeah.
one's really confident that what they're doing is the best thing for people, and they're
It's
expecting to get found out. But close that loop. Just go and ask your customers who continue buying from you what the value is, and you will know exactly what the value is, and then you'll be confident.
and 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 make selling the most noble thing you do, right?
Yes.
And so, how do you do that? You make sure that every sale is actually uh, an act of service, you know,
Yes.
and elevate to this position of facilitation where you become the sage that has profound genius, is powerfully calm, and communicates with such practical simplicity that people are just blown away by what you say. It's I was having a conversation with some people yesterday, and I was saying, how is it that you have created this profile globally and that you are able to stop rooms? And my response is because I go there with the intention of stopping the room. Like it's intentional. I'm looking for something to say and put in front of people that is going to rattle every cage in the room. I'm not
Yes.
going to commoditize a conversation. And, it might feel like you're flying without a safety net, but the safety net for me are the models. I mean, when
Yes.
someone came up to me after that presentation on stage where I sold the other guy's product, a really experienced marketer and salesperson who was running the conference, he said, I can't believe how you get on stage and fly without a safety net over and over and over again. I'm going, Mal, the models are my net.
Yes.
I'm carrying them with me in my iPad, mate. It's just that no one sees them like that. So salespeople need to have the right safety net, and what they use as their safety net is they talk and talk and talk, their product brochures and stuff like that. Have a safety net that allows you to freestyle.
Here's their safety net is evasion. Is because this is my other
That is
big
so
thing
true.
is actually not putting yourself in the game, not putting yourself in the situation where where you find out, is this going to be of value to them or otherwise.
Wow.
So that is the safety net. It's like,
Yeah.
I didn't risk anything. Do you know what I mean? I didn't upset anyone, didn't offend anyone, didn't excite anyone, but I didn't lose anything because I didn't risk anything. So
Wow.
yeah,
How about that? That's an uncomfortable truth.
I think it really is. But I'm loving these conversations that I have. I was speaking to a guy. They call him the phone assassin or something. They call him, which is really
Oh,
bad, and he accepts it's
yeah.
bad. But he calls himself a conversation architect. And in the
Mm,
conversation I was having, because I started on the phone, selling on the phone, so I also think, like, now I know it exists, I also think of myself as a conversation architect. But I was thinking about his marketing. His tagline should be, if your salespeople are doing all right now, imagine how good they're going to be when they find out how easy it is. It's
yeah.
like, because everyone thinks sales is the hardest thing in the world, but you just phone people up and make friends with them. Do you know what I mean? See if you can help them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Are you ready for the
Well,
good news
it's
yet?
yes, the good news. Yeah.
Good news is it's only taken us an hour and a half, but I am happy to report that I think you are adequately qualified to talk to us about using visual models to sell stuff. Um,
Right.
we have gone for an hour and a half. I mean, we've gone half an hour over the time you committed to me. Are we still cool? We can wrap this up in 10 minutes, I think. And if we could have
Sure.
conversations in the future, that would I would love that.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'm sure we can push on for 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, we need to get it done in sort of 10, 15 minutes because I've got other things
Sure.
coming up as well. There's still four questions remaining. This is the beauty of the four questions. The second question is, who do you work with? How do you add value to their lives? I think you've amply demonstrated that, and you've listed all the types of businesses that you've helped. So I think you've answered that question already. Question three is, what is your recommendation for anyone who is looking to apply this kind of thinking to their situations? And you need to tell me the answer to this in like less than 2 minutes because this will go on TikTok. We'll clip this up for
So,
TikTok.
um, the reality is, I created this whole process. And so there aren't any books around what we do that people can go and resource. There are books about models that you can get, management models and that sort of thing. I think there's a book called 61 Management Models Everybody Should Know. There's just not a whole lot of resource around this topic worldwide. People can go to our website. I do have a whole bunch of video content on there, and people can see a bunch of models in action and find out more about it. And we teach a lot of stuff around this. But um, if people start studying management models, um, that's really where the thinking started for me. I think some of the stuff that brings into play some of the thinking behind it rather than the models themselves. I think one of the best books I've ever written is by Napoleon Hill, and it is not Think and Grow Rich. It's a book called Outwitting the Devil, and it is a truly profound book about success and performance. And if you read it and you really get you really understand what he's saying. It'll change the way you think about things. And the story of it, he wrote it after he published Think and Grow Rich. He didn't really feel like he'd hit the mark with Think and Grow Rich. And so he went away and wrote this book and came back in, I think, 1928. And the literary device that he was using was he was having a conversation with the devil. And he said to the devil, "Tell me how you cause most men to fail at life." And the devil said, "I will tell you, so long as you call me your majesty." And so he has this conversation with the devil, and he asks him a whole bunch of questions, and the devil gives him his answers, and then he documents that. He came back, and his wife said, "Are you crazy? They will put you in an asylum and run us out of town if you publish a book that you're talking to the devil." So he made a promise to her that it wouldn't be published until she had died. And so it was not published until 2010. And it's a fascinating book. I would recommend people consume any of the Challenger Sale content that they can. And I don't know if you've read the Challenger Sale material.
I'm
But
familiar with
it,
Challenger sales, but I haven't
yeah,
read.
so they released that about 10 years ago, and that really shaped, because my style of selling is actually challenge based selling. That's what the models are. We're challenging people to think at a deeper level as a customer, right? That a deeper level than price. And then the challenger sale follow up research, which has only just been released, the next level of saying beyond the challenger sale is sense making. So you've got to challenge the customer, and then you have to be a sense maker, which is the sage, basically. So I think if people consume the challenger sale and the follow up material around that, that's fundamentally useful for them. And I um, I think one of the well, I mentioned that book about from Michael Gerber about the most successful small business in the world. But there's a book called I'm not sure if it's called The Art of the Noble Sale or something like that. That is an equally good piece of work. What I would encourage people to do is also go back to um, the world. I know this is more than 2 minutes, but the world has fascinated itself with inbound selling, lead funnels, lead magnets, digital sales systems and automations to get the customer to opt in, right? The world of outbound selling, like if you sell to enterprise clients and you want about 30 clients a year, all you should have is a list of the 200 companies you want to work with and be in an outbound sales process with them, marketing directly to them and picking up the phone and calling people and building the connection and hanging out and doing, as you said, becoming, friends with them. And I would encourage everybody to investigate the world of outbound selling. And two of the best thinkers around outbound selling are Anthony Iannarino, it's the salesblog.com, and Jeb Blount, Blount, Sales Gravy. Great stuff. Great stuff. So there's plenty there that people could play with.
100%. Brilliant. Well, now you've answered question number 4, which was what should people read? So now I need to check in with you, and I need to hear from you how you're feeling about having been part of the Talk Marketing Show experience. How are you feeling about it? You look quite happy.
Well, of course, you and I had a really interesting conversation beforehand talking about things that we shouldn't mention in a podcast.
And now the world knows we're busted.
Yeah. But look, I love these conversations because I think that we need to start a different kind of movement in sales. And I like it when I end up in conversations with people that are there as well, and you clearly are. We just need to challenge people. The industrial age of selling is gone.
Yes.
We're in a different space. And so I think these kinds of conversations, it's been great fun, but it's also really important that we challenge people to think about the science and the art of selling and its role. It is the thing that drives economies. Sales is the only thing that drives economies.
Yes.
And we need to encourage people to become salespeople. We need to encourage people to make it an art form, make it a craft. And I'm a real, and I'm very committed to the idea of bias safety and high integrity, noble selling. So I've had a great time.
Excellent. Cool. And I'm with you. I think apart from being the most noble art or the most noble practice or the most noble profession, whichever of those 3 words it was that you used, it's the most necessary. If you're not bringing money into your business, you don't have a business. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And people barely have businesses because they're not invested enough in marketing and then the selling. That's how I feel about it. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad that you've enjoyed this experience because now you should find it easier to throw a couple of people under the bus who might also enjoy to have conversations like this with me. And it needs to be people you can introduce me to. And the nice thing about this is that the universe is leading this little endeavor rather than me. So, I've got no idea who you might think might be interested in having a conversation like
Yeah.
this.
So, um, uh, the, the person that I lean on the most, in terms of how we use LinkedIn as a platform, is a different thinker about LinkedIn. He's not that thinker that says, put X posts up and that sort of thing. He's the kind of person that picks apart the algorithm and serves LinkedIn's business model in order to win at LinkedIn, rather than what everybody else does, which is try and serve themselves. And Adam is someone I think would be very happy to jump onto a podcast with you and talk about LinkedIn and his approach to LinkedIn.
Fantastic. What is Adam's surname?
Houlihan, Houhlan, and I can certainly give you
Houhilan. Houlihan.
HL,
HL.
Houhlan, Houlihan. No, Houhalan. I missed an A.
Hula.
Houh.
Okay, Houlihan.
Yeah,
Got it.
Houlihan. Um, and what who you've had on your podcast, and I know a whole bunch of people. Is there kind of a topic area that you would love to unpack that you haven't really unpacked yet?
You know what? I'm astounded. You are going to be about the 80th episode. So it's incredible how many people I've spoken to and all the different subjects that I've spoken about. I'm really happy to be led by the universe. It's whoever you think has something really interesting to say. You have blown my tiny mind. So I'm sure if there's someone that you think is, and you can introduce me to who could add value, then that's more important to me than, I'm out of the road. This is going where the universe is taking it.
Yeah. So let me think. I'm just running through my Rolodex in my head at the moment that the kind of people that might bring some perspectives to things that are wildly different. There's a he's a particularly good thinker, and it leans into sales. But Josh McKitterick is his name, and Josh is a content expert in terms of the teaching content on the page side of the offer. So you sold to the client, and now you're going to deliver, a program or teaching to them. He is the sharpest mind in that kind of course design that I've met and worked with, because all of his course design is really a sale. It's actually a sale. So, and he'll say things like, coaches record their webinars and then put that into their portal as content. How dare you? Don't be so bloody lazy. Record an actual video that's 5 minutes long and gives them exactly the steps to do, and don't make them watch an hour-long webinar and pluck it out for themselves. I think that's brilliant,
Yes.
But it's the structure of how he thinks about. He's really good at here's how you influence people to do stuff, and so it's great stuff in terms of sales, but also even for those people that might be putting content together, small trainings, even presentations. I mean, he's a whiz at presentation material and things like that. So, and just plucking information out of people, he'd be good. He'd be an interesting conversation for you. He's not afraid to have a chat. He'd be an interesting conversation. Yeah.
Excellent. Cool, man. And yeah, so if you could put together like an email introduction, or I don't know if Ben actually got to the point where he put together the LinkedIn invitation, but if you could do that for me, that would be phenomenal. Thank you so much.
I'll shoot you an intro.
You have probably blown my mind today, Simon. You really have. I mean, this is the best conversation. What's actually blowing my mind is the way this process is working, like how good for me these conversations are, how motivating they are, how exciting they are. You know, it's gone from when I was on episode 12, one of my mates just said, yeah, it's just you talking to your mates. Do you know what I mean? But where it's gone now, like I'm talking to people like you in Australia, I'm talking to people in the States, I'm talking to people all over the world. But this has been a phenomenal conversation, man. This has taken it to another level, I think. So,
Fabulous.
so what we'll do now is we'll say goodbye for the benefit of anyone who's still watching or listening. And then I'll stop the recording and we'll say goodbye like normal human beings and talk about things we're not supposed to talk about again, probably.
Perfect.
So, man, thank you so much for being involved today. This has been a great conversation. I'm sure people will take value from this.
Absolutely my pleasure.